Hi, I'm Summer. And on my 34th birthday, my mom threw a brunch without telling me, then kissed my fiancé in front of the whole room. I thought that was the worst part. But it wasn't. It was what she whispered after. Loud enough for everyone to hear. You're worthless. And everyone just watched. So I gave her something back. Not a scene. Not a scream. Just a gift box. Want to know what was inside? I didn't expect balloons or a full-blown celebration, but I did expect a text. The morning of my 34th birthday started with nothing, no message from my mother, no group text from the family chat. Just silence, like my name had been deleted somewhere in the night. Judson, my fiancé, had already left the house, said he had to run some errands with my mother. No details, just vague. It was early, and I didn't want to be dramatic. I'd learned to ignore the little things. But this wasn't little. It was the kind of quiet that told you something was being planned. Without you. I sat on the edge of my bed, still in my robe, scrolling through my phone. The notifications were few. A high school friend posted HBD on my timeline. A coworker sent a generic GIF. Nothing from the people who were supposed to remember. I swallowed the lump in my throat and whispered, maybe I'm just a footnote in my own life. Still, I got dressed. Still, I went out. The brunch spot wasn't far. Darla had mentioned something about a casual get-together, nothing fancy, just family and friends. She always liked to keep things low effort when it came to me. For Letty, my older sister, gone now 5 years, it had always been the full spread. But for me, brunch would do. I pulled into the lot. There were already cars parked. A lot of them. I opened the door to the restaurant and froze. Everyone was already there, seated, laughing, drinking, a table of at least 20 people, all familiar faces, cousins, in-laws, neighbors from 2 streets down. The kind of crowd you don't gather last minute. Darla was mid-laugh when she saw me walk in. She didn't skip a beat. "Surprise," she called out, like I'd ruined my own party by showing up. I scanned the room. My seat, the one I would have taken, was filled. Someone else's purse sat there. Judson stood up slightly, then hesitated. He looked at me like I'd caught him doing something stupid, but not illegal. I tried to smile. A waiter came up behind me, polite but confused. "Are you at the Jackson party?" I shook my head, didn't answer. Just nodded toward the long table and walked in, quiet. My body stiff, my hands clenched. Someone offered me a drink, but no one offered me a seat. I stood at the end of the table until a teenager shuffled down, freeing a corner spot for me. No one said anything about it. "You weren't answering your phone," Darla said, as if that explained everything. "We figured you'd catch up." I nodded, pretended not to hear the sting in her voice. The conversation flowed around me like I wasn't there. Judson was busy entertaining the table. My mother was directing photos like a PR agent. I sipped my mimosa and waited for it to be over. Then came the cake. The server wheeled it out with a flourish, candles flickering. I leaned forward just enough to see the frosting, thick pink cursive across the white icing. "Happy birthday, Letty!" The name landed like a slap. A hush fell. Someone gasped quietly. Then Darla laughed. "Oh no," she said, waving a hand. "The bakery must have reused an old order. You know how forgetful they are." People chuckled nervously. A few guests smiled too hard. Judson looked down at his lap. I stared at the cake. Letty? Even now. Even when she's not here. I didn't say anything. My throat closed around the words I wanted to scream. I felt like a ghost crashing her own memorial. A couple of guests pulled out their phones, taking photos, maybe videos. My face caught in the candlelight, frozen, mourning someone who never had to fight to be remembered. I should have walked out, but instead, I stayed, smiled, let them sing the wrong name with full voices and half hearts. You don't cry in public. That's how they win. That's what I kept telling myself as I stood to give a short thank you speech. I said something about being grateful. My voice cracked on the word family. I don't remember what else I said, only that when I stopped talking, people clapped. Darla clapped the loudest. I sat back down, sliding my hand into my coat pocket. My fingers curled around a small metal pin, shaped like a chestnut branch. My dad gave it to me years ago, said it looked like strength in disguise. I rolled it between my fingers, held my breath, and counted backward from 10. I didn't stay for the gifts. I didn't finish my drink. As I left, I muttered under my breath, "Next year, I'll celebrate somewhere that remembers my name." I didn't go home right after brunch. Darla had insisted we come back to her place for a few pictures and a toast. She'd said it like an afterthought, like I wasn't the reason for any of it, but I knew what that tone meant. When my mother said something was casual, it meant you better show up camera ready. So I went. Her house was already filled when I got there. Same people from brunch, now scattered across the living room with wine glasses in hand. Laughter floated in the air like nothing had happened just hours before. Like the wrong name on the cake wasn't still burned into the back of my eyes. I stepped inside, closed the door behind me, and scanned the room. My cousin waved from across the room, nodding toward the kitchen. A photographer was there. Not a family member with an iPhone. An actual photographer. Tripod, flash umbrella, the works. This wasn't spontaneous. I was halfway through the entryway when someone handed me a glass of something pink and bubbly. "You look lovely, Ro," they said, moving past me before I could even react. I caught a few fragments of conversation. "She looks amazing today," someone said. Then a cousin, leaning close to her friend, lowered her voice just enough for me to still hear. "Your mom looks stunning today. That dress." Something seized in my chest. I knew. Before I saw it, I knew. I took my time getting to the den, pretended I was checking my phone. My hands were cold, not from the air conditioning. When I turned the corner, there she was, Darla, my mother, standing in the center of the room, arm loosely hooked into Judson's, laughing. She was wearing my engagement dress. The ivory tea-length one I had picked out 6 months ago. The one I kept hidden in the back of my closet in a boutique garment bag, tag still attached. I hadn't told anyone about it, had planned to wear it on the day Judson and I announced our wedding date. Now it clung to my mother's hips like it was made for her. I didn't speak at first, just stood there. She saw me, of course, turned a little in my direction, smiled like nothing was wrong. "You have wider hips, honey," she said. "It wouldn't have flattered you." Someone behind her laughed too loud. Another woman nodded. "It's such a youthful cut. Darla, you look 20 years younger." And just like that, my moment, what was supposed to be my moment, was now her memory. I didn't argue, didn't ask how she found the dress. I already knew. She'd helped me clean last week, said she was reorganizing the coat closet where I'd hidden it. I stood there, frozen, her body in my dress, my fiancé by her side, my name replaced, my image stolen. During the toast, it got worse. She raised her glass, called the room to attention, thanked everyone for coming, said something about family always finding a way to lift each other up. Then she turned to Judson and said, "Come here, sweetheart." Just one photo with my future son-in-law. He didn't even look at me. He walked up, stood beside her. She wrapped her arm around him and leaned in, planted a kiss right on his cheek. Laughter exploded in the room. Glasses clinked. Camera flashes popped. Someone shouted, "Careful, Judson, you've got competition." Darla beamed. "Well, I did have him first, remember? I introduced them." And Judson? He didn't laugh, but he didn't move either. Just looked at the floor and smiled that soft, useless smile I used to think meant kindness. I left the room. No one noticed. The porch outside was quiet, cooler. I gripped the railing with both hands and stared out over the empty backyard. I didn't cry. I just stood there, trying to remember how to breathe right. It wasn't about the dress. It wasn't even about the kiss. It was the realization that I had spent most of my life being edited out of every moment that was supposed to belong to me. The sliding door creaked behind me. I turned slightly. Mrs. Petty, our neighbor from 2 doors down, stood there with a glass in her hand. She didn't say much, just looked at me and said softly, "I hope you don't let your mother steal everything from you, sweet girl." Then she walked back inside, leaving her words behind like a trail I hadn't expected to follow. I stayed out there until the sun dipped below the fence line. Inside, the laughter kept going. They were still celebrating. I was the only one not in the picture. I didn't change out of the dress, didn't kick off the shoes. I walked into the house, dropped my keys onto the counter, and let the silence settle around me like fog. The weight of everything that had happened, of everything I hadn't said, clung to my skin. I moved through the house like I didn't live there, like I was afraid to make noise in someone else's home. The closet door stuck a little when I pulled it open. I reached to hang my jacket, but paused. There it was, Dad's cedar chest. It hadn't been touched in years. I'd kept it tucked away behind out-of-season coats and boxes of things I didn't want to remember. But tonight, something drew me toward it. Maybe I needed to touch something that hadn't lied to me. The hinges groaned when I opened it. Inside, the same smell of old wood and time. I dug through the contents, photo albums, childhood drawings, some cards from birthdays where the cake had my name spelled right. And then I saw it. A single Polaroid tucked between two albums. It was my mother, Darla, and Wes, Letty's boyfriend from senior year. They were standing in someone's backyard, mid-laugh, drinks in hand. But her hand was on his shoulder. Not in a friendly way. Too close. Too familiar. It wasn't just what was in the photo, it was the way she was looking at him, like she was performing for someone, and he was playing along. I didn't know what hit harder, the image or the fact that I wasn't surprised. I sat on the floor, knees to my chest, and stared at it for a long time. The room faded, and another memory surfaced. It was the night of my own engagement party. I was 24, still naive enough to think Darla's approval meant love. I remember the lights were dim, the music soft, and people were just finishing their dessert. Then Darla stood up and collapsed. It was dramatic, right in the middle of the toast. I remember someone yelling for help. My fiancé, Jonas, ran over. An ambulance was called. Everyone was panicking. At the hospital, the doctor said it was stress. She was fine within the hour, smiling again by the next morning. 2 weeks later, Jonas ended it, said it was just too much, that he couldn't build a life around drama. Back then, I blamed myself. But tonight, something cracked. I laid the photo down on the rug beside me. I started writing. On the back of an old receipt, dates, events, moments where someone else's celebration somehow ended up being about Darla, about her health, her dress, her opinions, her control. Letty's school play? Darla showed up late and made a scene about being seated in the wrong row. My college graduation? She accidentally wore white and gave a 10-minute speech about how hard it was raising daughters alone after Dad died, even though I'd been the one paying rent by then. Every major life moment had a shadow behind it, and it wore her name. I thought back to Judson. How quickly he'd let go of my hand the moment Darla smiled, and it clicked. My mother didn't need to steal outright. She just had to be center stage. She didn't scream. She didn't shout. She smiled her way into every spotlight and left the rest of us clapping from the wings. I sat there on that rug and stopped making excuses for her, stopped telling myself, that's just how she is, stopped pretending that the patterns were mine to ignore. I picked up the photo again. It wasn't blurry. There was no room for maybe. It was clear enough to hurt. I laid it next to the envelope Dad had left me before he passed. Still sealed. Still waiting. Maybe tomorrow. I looked around the room. Same walls, same pictures, same silence I'd trained myself to live inside. If she did this to Letty, I said out loud, she can do it to anyone. I stood up, wiped my palms against my dress, and walked into the kitchen. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I pulled open a drawer and took out a folder. It was empty. Just a label across the front. Later. I slid the Polaroid inside. That night, I didn't sleep. I planned. 2 days passed, but the silence hadn't settled. It lingered, like the kind that trails after a storm, but before the next one rolls in. Judson said we had to go. Darla's charity night was something she'd been planning for weeks, and apparently, not showing up would make things worse. I didn't argue. Not because I agreed, I just didn't have the energy to explain why showing up already felt like losing. but I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of my absence. That's how she operated, twisting every little choice into her own narrative. So, I put on a plain gray dress, tied my hair back, and told myself to stay in the back. The hearth was packed. Town council folks, the church crowd, women from the garden club, everyone who pretended not to see things they absolutely did. Darla worked the room like she was running for office. Handshakes, cheek kisses, loud praise for every dollar pledged. She had on a navy sheath dress, pearls, and that thick, layered smile she wore when she knew all the cameras were watching. Judson walked ahead of me, already mingling, already pouring drinks and pulling out chairs. He didn't wait for me, didn't even introduce me, just floated from table to table like he belonged everywhere, and I belonged nowhere. I found a seat near the back, quiet, near the kitchen door. Not one person said, "I'm glad you're here." But no one told me to leave either. I guess that's what counted as kindness now. About halfway through the evening, Darla tapped her wine glass with a spoon. The sound cut through the soft music, drawing attention like clockwork. She stood, lifted her glass, and smiled. "I just want to take a moment," she began, "to thank each of you for being part of this community, for showing up, for caring." A few nods, polite murmurs. She went on to praise Judson. The restaurant. The cause, something about scholarships for underprivileged teens. It sounded noble. But then her tone shifted. And while most of us here know what gratitude looks like, some people never quite learn. She didn't say my name, but she didn't have to. Every set of eyes didn't need to turn toward me for me to feel them. I sat still, my jaw tight, my hands in my lap. I wasn't going to flinch. Not here. Not tonight. Nobody stopped her. Nobody stood up and said, "Hey, that's enough." Because that would mean acknowledging what she was really doing. And no one wanted to be the one to call the queen out in her own castle. I didn't respond. Didn't blink. Just stared straight ahead and waited for her to sit down. But Darla never settled for vague, not when she thought she could win. As she walked past my table, she leaned down, smiling like we were in on a joke only we understood. "You didn't have to do that," I whispered, voice low and firm. She stopped, tilted her head, bent closer. Her perfume was expensive and sharp. Then she said it. "Maybe if you weren't so ungrateful and pathetic, someone would celebrate you. But you're worthless." A fork clattered to the floor. A woman near the bar gasped. Someone mumbled, "Did she just—" But no one said a damn word. I stood up, not fast, just enough to stop shaking. My eyes were hot, my chest tight, but I didn't let it show. I looked at her, really looked. And in that moment, she smiled wider because she thought she won. I turned without a word and walked toward the exit. The air outside was colder than I expected. I leaned against the brick wall just past the front window, where the laughter inside still spilled out like nothing had happened. A young server stepped out after a minute, handed me my coat without making eye contact. She didn't say anything, and I didn't expect her to. No one else followed, not Judson, not a cousin, not a neighbor. I wasn't surprised. I wrapped my coat tighter and whispered to no one in particular, "I'm not worthless. I'm just not hers." And for the first time, I meant it. There was no boiling rage, no dramatic scream, just a quiet shift, something permanent. I wouldn't shrink anymore, wouldn't try to explain myself to people who decided long ago not to hear me. The old version of me would have stayed, would have tried to fix it, soften it, make it easier for everyone else. That woman was gone. The morning came without feeling. I sat on the edge of my bed, still dressed from the night before, the imprint of Darla's words stamped on the inside of my skull like a warning label I couldn't peel off. Judson was already gone. Left a note on the counter that said, "Running errands, back later." No kiss on the forehead, no coffee in the pot, just absence wrapped in excuses. The house was too quiet. Not peaceful. Empty. The kind of quiet that makes your thoughts louder than they ought to be. I opened my laptop, intending to distract myself with emails, maybe delete junk mail. But something made me pause. The restaurant. The paperwork. The memory of signing things temporarily while Judson worked with a local lawyer on the LLC. I remember feeling uneasy then, but he'd smiled, held my hand, said, "We'll update it once it's up and running. Trust me." Back then, I did. I searched my inbox for that original agreement, scrolled until my eyes hurt, found the chain, opened the attachments. Something stood out. The lawyer's email thread copied Judson and Darla, but not me. I closed the laptop. 15 minutes later, I walked into the town clerk's office with a half-hearted smile and told the woman at the counter, "Just here to double-check a business record, for peace of mind." She nodded, her fingers moving across the keyboard with the slow assurance of someone who's been doing this too long. "What's the business name?" "The Hearth." A few clicks later, she tilted the screen toward me. "Here we go. Judson Merle, Darla Whitmore." That was it. No Rowena Kincaid. Not as a partner, not as an investor, not as a damn footnote. My name didn't exist. I stared at the screen for too long. The clerk looked at me, then back to the monitor. She cleared her throat. "They filed an amended ownership 6 weeks ago. Common enough, happens all the time." Her voice softened. "You just gotta be careful who you trust." I didn't answer. I took a printed copy, said thank you, and walked out into the sunlight like I was coming out of surgery. Numb, blinking, unsure how much blood I'd lost. I stood on the sidewalk, the paper shaking in my hands. My name wasn't there. $23,000. That's how much I'd put into the restaurant. Every cent I had. Gone. And not just the money. I thought of every night I closed the register alone while Judson was out meeting vendors. Every night I brought home burnt fingers and unopened takeout containers. Every friend I stopped calling. Every plan I stopped making so he could chase his. And now there wasn't a line in the ledger with my name on it. They didn't just cut me out of a business, they erased me from the story. I walked home. Didn't stop. Didn't cry. But when I opened the front door, I didn't go to the kitchen. Didn't turn on the light. I went straight to the filing drawer in the hallway, pulled every folder out, spread them across the floor. Most were bills, letters, useless printouts, but one caught my eye, a faded sheet. An early investment letter Judson had typed on our old laptop. His name, my signature. A note scribbled in the margin. "She's everything this place needs." I stared at it. It wasn't much. Not legally, not anymore. But it was something. I placed it on the table, beside the unopened envelope from my father. The one I still couldn't bring myself to open. Then I sat there, staring at the table like it might stare back. For months, I'd been trying to speak the truth. Out loud, to Judson, to my mother, to anyone who would listen. But maybe truth didn't need to be shouted. Maybe it needed to be documented. Because Darla, she didn't just manipulate people. She shaped the image, bent it until it suited her, then printed it out and passed it around like a family photo. But she made one mistake. She thought I didn't have a copy of my own. I ran my fingers along the top of the folder, then pulled a sticky note from the drawer and wrote 2 words. "For later." Then I closed the folder, stood up, and placed it neatly back into the drawer. I didn't do much after getting back from the clerk's office. Didn't eat. Didn't shower. Just sat on the couch with that copy of the ownership papers in my lap, reading the names over and over. Judson Merle, Darla Whitmore. No Rowena. No trace of the nights I scraped grease off ovens while Judson pitched dream after dream. No record of my savings, my sacrifice, or my silence. By the time the sun started folding into the trees, I grabbed my phone and opened the gallery to delete old screenshots, junk messages, anything that felt like weight. I didn't expect to land in his group chat. Judson, his college buddies, stupid inside jokes and gifts that were never funny the first time. I was about to close it when one message pulled me back. "Rose mom is low-key a goddess. Hope I age like that, LOL." The timestamp said it was sent 2 weeks before our engagement announcement. I didn't blink, didn't even scroll. I just locked the screen and set the phone face down on the armrest. My heart didn't race, it dropped. That slow fall you can't stop, like a stone slipping through your fingers into water you thought was shallow. They laughed about her behind my back, admired her, in the same damn breath. I should have thrown the phone, or called him, or screamed. But I didn't do any of that. I just sat there, frozen in a kind of stillness that made me feel more alert than I'd been in weeks. I grabbed my keys and drove without thinking. Darla's house was still lit when I pulled up. I didn't call, just walked up, knocked once, and opened the door like I always had. She was in the kitchen, humming, slicing strawberries like nothing in the world was out of place. "Hey, I was hoping to pick up a few of Grandma's scarves," I said, keeping my voice steady. She smiled. "Of course, honey. They're in the hallway closet. Just grab what you like." I nodded and followed her down the hall. She left her phone on the counter. As I passed back through the kitchen, the screen lit up. Call from second daughter. Not Rowena, not Roe, not even daughter. Second daughter. I didn't pick it up, didn't touch it, just stared. I stood there longer than I meant to, reading those two words like they were etched into glass. Darla came back into the room holding a tin of cookies. "You always loved these," she said, all warmth and pretend. I smiled, took the scarves, and said nothing. I drove straight to Mrs. Petty's house, knocked once, like I always did. She opened the door with her soft cardigan and familiar eyes. "Brought some soup," I said, lifting the container. "Come in," she replied, "and let me put the kettle on." We didn't talk right away. She didn't press. But when we did, it came out quiet. "Your mother," she said, stirring her tea, "always had a way of making everyone orbit her." I didn't answer. "And you?" she continued. "You've always been the one with the quiet hands, holding everything together." That was all it took. Not tears. Just a shift. A snap inside me that wasn't loud, but final. She didn't have to say I was enough. But she did. And somehow, that mattered more than I expected. I left 20 minutes later. She handed me a small bundle of fresh lavender from her porch garden and said, "You don't need to prove anything anymore, sweet girl. Just remember who you are." I drove home slow, parked out front, sat in the car longer than usual. When I finally stepped inside, I tucked the scarves away in my top drawer, not hidden, just placed. Then I pulled the folder from the drawer, the one I'd labeled for later. I laid out every note, every email printout, every timestamp. Organized the timeline like I was prepping for trial. Not against her, not yet, but against forgetting, against excusing, against shrinking. She'd called me second daughter. Let's see what she calls me after I'm done. The morning after I found my name erased from the papers, I sat with the same cup of coffee for over an hour. Didn't drink it, just held it. The house was quiet, but inside me, something had changed. Not rage, not even sadness, just something steel-like. The email came at 10:42 a.m. Subject line, "You deserve better. Check the folder." No sender, no greeting, just a Google Drive link. I clicked it. The video was grainy, poor lighting, angled from the office camera at the hearth. But I knew that room. I'd wiped those counters, mopped that floor. Judson stood near the filing cabinet. Darla was beside him, close, too close. They were laughing. Her hand rested on his arm, then slid lightly to his lower back. He didn't pull away, didn't stiffen. He smiled and touched her shoulder in return. There was no kiss, no words, but everything was there. The comfort, the ease, the familiarity. "There it is," I whispered. The thing I hoped I'd never find. And I didn't cry. I closed the browser and sat still. No music, no noise. Just me, breathing. Then I opened Facebook. Darla had posted a photo that morning. She was standing in front of her bedroom mirror, wearing my engagement dress, hair curled, makeup perfect, one hand on her hip, the other holding her phone. Caption read, "Back in my prime." There were dozens of comments. "You look amazing, Darla." Secret engagement? Can't believe that's not a professional photo. Then Judson's comment. I stared at the screen, not even blinking. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was branding. She was crafting the narrative in real time, wearing the dress meant for my future, posting it like she owned it, like she was the star, and I had only ever been the understudy. I didn't close the laptop in anger. I didn't throw it across the room. I just opened the drawer. Pulled out the folder I'd labeled weeks ago, for later. I opened it and started organizing, laid out printouts, screenshots of texts, photos of birthday brunch, the engagement cake with the wrong name. I printed the ownership filings, the email chain that had excluded me. Then I added the still image from the video. Darla's hand on Judson's back, his smile, her smile. I wrote down a timeline, week by week. The week Judson stopped talking about wedding venues, same week Darla started inviting him over for menu planning. The week my name vanished from the business filing, the same one Judson said he was tight on time. It lined up, all of it. I added a tab, witnesses. Just a piece of paper for now. But it had names. Mrs. Petty. The clerk at the records office, a friend who'd seen Judson's car in Darla's driveway more than once. I wasn't building a case. I was building clarity. This wasn't about revenge. This was about memory, proof, truth. People like Darla don't fear confrontation. They fear being seen for who they really are. I didn't plan to scream. I planned to show. I pulled 2 fresh sheets from the printer. One was a still from the surveillance footage. The other was a screenshot of the Facebook post. I taped both inside the folder, labeled them Exhibit A and Exhibit B. Then I reached for a sticky note and wrote, "You framed me as weak, as replaceable, but I don't break, Darla. I document. No shaking hands, no churning stomach, just resolve." I folded the folder shut, placed it back in the drawer, stacked the lavender from Mrs. Petty on top of it. Then I leaned back and let the silence fill the room. I didn't need to strike today, but she wouldn't see me coming. I didn't RSVP. I didn't need to. Darla made sure I was included in the group text, but it wasn't an invitation. It was a warning. Her tone was always tucked between lines. Passive-aggressive, polished. The kind of voice that smiled while carving. I showed up anyway. The hearth looked like a wedding venue. White roses on every table, gold name cards, crystal flutes filled with champagne. It was supposed to be a brunch, but everything about it screamed spectacle. Darla's version of redoing the engagement, now that she had Judson fully in her pocket. She wore cream. Of course she did. The one color brides wear when they want people to pretend it's not a bridal announcement. Her hair was curled, her nails matched the linens, and her heels clicked across the tile like punctuation. Judson stood beside her like a well-dressed echo. She tapped her glass. "Thank you all for joining us today," she began, full smile, full power. "It means the world to celebrate with the people who have supported us most, us." She called him her future son-in-law, and I saw heads nod like it made sense, like I wasn't sitting in the back of the room, wearing black, watching it all like a funeral. I waited. When the toast ended and the crowd began to mill around, I stood, walked forward slowly. Every step was measured. Every eye that turned felt earned. I carried a small gift box, gold paper, white ribbon. Didn't say a word, just placed it gently on the table with the others, right in the center. People stared, some whispered. I walked away. Near the bar, a young caterer caught my arm gently. She looked nervous, new, likely hadn't been briefed on the family dysfunction. "Is that your fiancé up there with your mom?" she asked, pointing toward Judson. I turned. She looked embarrassed. "I thought she was the bride. Sorry." I smiled, just enough to keep her from panicking. "No need to apologize," I said. "You're not the first." Her face softened, but mine didn't. I watched the stage a while longer. Watched Darla take photos like she was the one getting married. Watched Judson hold her arm when she pretended to wobble from laughter. I didn't need to look at the gold box to know what was inside. She opened it during gift unwrapping. The room was quieter than before, still buzzing, but with a different energy now. Unease had a smell to it. I'd learned that over the years. She pulled the ribbon, opened the lid. Inside, 3 items. A printed copy of the business filing, the one with my name missing. A still from the surveillance video. Her hand on Judson's back. And a printout of the Facebook post. Her in my dress, captioned like she owned the timeline. On top of it all, a folded note. "You've built a beautiful story, Darla. I just thought the missing chapters deserved a seat at the table, too." It didn't explode. It didn't scream. But the silence that followed hit harder than any scandal. Gasps, phones raised. A man in the corner whispered something to his wife. A cousin pulled back her chair. Judson didn't move, just stared at the contents like they might rearrange themselves if he blinked hard enough. Darla's face didn't change, not right away, but her hand trembled, just slightly, just enough. I stepped forward again, reached for the mic. "Some of you know me. Some of you only think you do. That's okay." I paused. I used to think I needed someone else to validate me, to clap for me, to remember me. Turns out, I just needed to stop letting people rewrite me. No one clapped. Not because they didn't want to, but because the air was too thick with realization. I nodded, gently placed the mic back in its stand, and walked out. No scene. No exit line. As I reached the door, I heard someone say under their breath, "That was the real engagement speech." And someone else, quieter, followed. I always wondered how she stayed so quiet. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. After everything that happened at the brunch, the house felt quieter than it ever had. The kind of quiet that didn't feel peaceful, just hollow. I didn't take off my shoes, didn't turn on any lights. I just stood in the doorway with my hands still at my sides and listened to the silence that followed me in like a shadow. My phone buzzed, a string of texts, some from cousins I hadn't heard from in years. "Did you really mean to do that? I'm still shaking." "Good for you." I didn't answer a single one. I wasn't looking for applause. I lit a candle in the kitchen, not because I needed light, but because I needed something that burned quietly. Then I reached into the drawer beside the fridge and pulled out the envelope. It had been sitting there for months, sealed, worn at the corners, marked in my father's handwriting. For Ro. I held it between my palms for a long time before I even thought about opening it. "I've burned the bridges," I whispered. "I just want to know I wasn't wrong to light the match." I slid my thumb under the flap. The letter inside was dated 3 weeks before he died. The handwriting was slower than I remembered, slanted and shaky, but his voice came through clear. "Ro," it started. "If you're reading this, it means I didn't get the chance to say enough before I left." I read each line slowly, like prayer, like confession. He wrote about how proud he was of me, not for anything I did, but for who I was. He said he worried Darla would always cast a longer shadow, that he saw how hard I tried to stay kind, stay good, stay silent. He said he wished he'd done more, but it was one line that stopped me cold. "You spent so long being what others needed, but did you ever stop to ask yourself what you want?" I set the letter down, stared at it, then breathed, really breathed, for what felt like the first time in years. It wasn't an answer, it was permission, and I needed that more than I thought. I leaned back in the chair, let the candle flicker, and let myself go somewhere else. Backward. I thought of birthday parties where I passed out cake instead of getting a slice, of school concerts where Darla made sure the spotlight hit her louder than my name, of Letty, perfect even in death, and of Judson, silent even when he saw me disappearing. I whispered his question to myself. What do I want? I walked over to the counter, grabbed a pad and pen, and started writing, "Peace." My name back, to stop apologizing for being present, to stop being edited out. I circled one line in pen. To never let anyone name me again, but me. I stood, walked to the bedroom, opened the drawer, and found my father's chestnut branch pin. I pinned it to my sweater, just above my heart, no hiding this time. Then I returned to the kitchen, opened the folder marked "For Later," and gently placed it in a box. I wasn't burning it, just putting it where it belonged, outside of me. I folded another letter, short and steady, and laid it next to my father's. "You saw me, Dad. I'm starting to see me too." I stepped outside, barefoot. Cold grass met my skin. It stung, then settled. I looked up. No music, no apology, no phone call from Darla or Judson begging to make it right. And still, somehow, I felt whole. Not because they changed, but because I stopped needing them to.